Hello, and welcome to another episode of Crowsdale's very own talk show, Know Your Neighbor. I'm your host, Caroline Riskowich from Life Enrichment. We decided to start this talk show because we believe that every single person has a story to tell, and a story that is worth hearing. We believe the residents at Crowsdale are no exception. I've heard from countless people that they've learned more about their neighbors from watching this show than they ever knew before. Isn't it crazy that we can live right next door to someone for years and not know about their lives? We want to change that. That's why we have new episodes of Know Your Neighbor every Wednesday at 4 o'clock on channel 1390. I am so excited to welcome today's guest to the show, my friend and Crowsdale resident, Dr. Grambow. I first met Dr. Grambow my first week here at Crowsdale. I was sitting out on the patio at Heritage Hall and saw someone very gently and professionally tending to the roses. We met and started talking, and I've loved seeing him around the community ever since. I've also had the privilege of meeting his wonderful wife, Barbara, and getting to know them a little bit better. The Grambows are avid animal lovers. They are art collectors. They are parents, grandparents, and great-grandparents. They are friends to many at Crowsdale, and I'm lucky to call them my friends as well. Today, I'm excited to hear more about Dr. Grambow's profession as an extremely successful veterinarian. Dr. Grambow, I am so happy you're here today.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here.
I could have gone on and on in my introduction. I'm so glad you're here today. And before we dive in to talking about your career as a veterinarian, I would just like to hear very generally, how are you doing? This has been a challenging year.
Certainly been a different year, hasn't it? Well, we're doing fine, and it's only because of the environment we live in that we can be happy at home and still have all the services right nearby and feel very secure, thanks to Crowsdale.
I agree. This is a good place to be.
Yes.
During a pandemic like this. If you have to be somewhere, Crowsdale feels very safe and secure and feels
right.
Like a good home right now more than ever.
We're all eager to see the new edition being used fully, but we know that'll come with time.
Yes, it's fun being in this auditorium right now, just the two of us in this
right.
huge space. I'm excited to look out at this empty room and think about it being full, right. Hopefully sooner rather than later.
Right.
So, like I mentioned, you worked as a veterinarian. But before all of that, before you were a successful adult, what was your childhood like? Where were you born and raised?
I was born in southwestern New York in a little tiny village called Cuba. and raised in that area, Hinsdale, Olean area, for about 8 years. And then we moved to Brockport, New York, which is up near Rochester. And my mother was a teacher. My father was a carpenter. Unfortunately, he died of Hodgkin's disease when I was 3 years old, and he was only 29 years old. My mother was determined to put my brother and I through college, and she did it. She never remarried, and we had good family support, but my mother was determined to raise us, and I think she did a great job. My brother's a civil engineer. From Brockport, we went on to college, and we'll get to that, I think, in a few seconds. But had a great childhood. I spent every summer from about 10 years old to my 21st year on my grandfather's farm. He had a large dairy farm with about 100 head of brown Swiss cattle. We milked and bottled the milk and delivered, so we did the whole thing, pasteurized it. So I swept floors and I pushed hay and I took care of cattle as well as helped deliver the milk. From there, I got interested in working with cattle and being a veterinarian. My summers, at the end of the summer every year, we showed the cattle at the state fairs, not state fair, but the county fairs in western New York. And it was an introduction to veterinary medicine through that.
So, first of all, I just want to back up for a minute that your mom deserves a lot of credit for raising you and your brother. And I think you turned out somewhat decent. But as a single mother, you said your dad passed away when you were just 3 years old.
Right.
Is your brother younger or older?
He's 10 months older.
10 months older. Okay. So she had 2 very young sons when her husband passed away. I can't imagine. Yeah. So then, like you said, you grew up spending summers at the grandparents' farm, and it sounds like you had to work pretty hard. Was that something that you enjoyed? Do you remember looking forward to those summers, or was it something you did begrudgingly?
No, I loved every minute of it, and I couldn't wait to get there. When school was out, I was in the car and ready to go. It was 93 miles to drive there, and I couldn't wait to get there, yeah.
What was your favorite part? You said you did everything basically from milkman to cleaner and everything in between. Was there a task on the farm that you liked the most?
I don't think there was any one task. There was a few I didn't like, but that was all right. That goes with every job. Anybody that has to clean up after cattle would know that sometimes that becomes a pain. I did it after animals from there on in my life, so that's all right.
I mean, you weren't scared away by cleaning up after the cows, so you must have...
I sweep the driveway at home here, and I think about sweeping the barn. That was one of my first chores as a young kid.
I bet sweeping the driveway at Crowsdale is a little bit easier than sweeping the barn.
Yeah, but I enjoy everything, yeah.
And you mentioned that at the end of each of these summers at the farm, you would go with your grandfather as he showed the cattle at the county fair. And like you said, this experience every summer was when you first got started thinking about taking care of animals as a profession. Did you mention to me once before that you saw a veterinarian working with the cattle at the fair, right?
Right. the veterinary came to the farm. They had to have physical exams and health certificates before we could take them to the county fair. And so that was an introduction to what they did. Also, he would come when we had an emergency or some other reason. And so I came in contact with him at that point, and it's very good.
Was there anything else that you considered being when you grew up?
I considered being a math teacher, and my mother said, no way. She was a counselor in high school, and she says, your English and your spelling will never get you through that kind of education. But I made it through veterinary medicine, so. But she was right. She was right.
You must have some smarts if you could make it through veterinary medicine, but I suppose being a math teacher would be a different type of challenge.
Well, I think it was because I had a good math teacher, and he was kind to me, and I enjoyed working with him in high school. Yeah.
You know, it's interesting that you say that, because the two things that you considered being when you grew up were based off impressions that you got from other adults in your life. The math teacher you had who impacted you positively, and the veterinarian you saw on your grandparents' farm. And I think that's an interesting point to think, as adults, you never know when a kid might be watching you at your work and thinking, wow, that seems like something I might want to do.
Right. And I think everybody here has experienced that you've affected the way kids think and how they are exposed to different careers and like that. Yeah. Had many of them come to our veterinary hospital, and quite a few of them stayed in the profession.
Right. That's really neat to think about, all the people that you've impacted and who have become vets because of you. What specifically about being a veterinarian appealed to you? Was it taking care of herding animals? Was it getting to have a hands-on job? Do you remember what aspect of the job appealed to you the most?
Well, I think it was working with animals and the challenges of medicine, but it's also a career of working with people. I started off in large animal and general practice and ended up in small animal practice like many people, companion animals. It was very good, and I enjoyed working with the people as well as the animals, yeah.
I'm glad you said that, because I keep asking you about working with animals, but especially in terms of pets, the animals do have humans that come along with them, and you have to work with the family as well. You mentioned the summers during your school years. Then you went to Cornell for college, right?
Right.
Tell me about the experience there. I know you and Barbara are still very much part of the Cornell community.
Well, we're a Cornell family, you might say. Well, I was lucky enough to go to the agriculture college for 2 years, which you had to do in those days for a pre-vet education. And then I went into fortunate to get into veterinary college. They only took 50 students. This was a state college. At that time, there was no tuition, but fees we had. So that was very good. It was hard. I studied most of the time, but I made it through, and it's a very good school. There's many veterinary schools. Well, there's not many. There's only about 25 now in the nation. There's more. At the time that I graduated, there was probably only about 18 or so. So to get in, it's very competitive.
And do I remember you saying that it was only men at that time, right?
I was in the last class at Cornell that had no women, and it was very discriminatory.
Well, good thing that changed because you now have a daughter who is a veterinarian, right? Did she
Right.
go to Cornell?
Right. I have 3 daughters. They've all graduated from Cornell. Barbara and I both graduated from Cornell, and I have a granddaughter that graduated from Cornell. 2 son-in-laws that are Cornellians. So we have 8 in the family and 13 degrees among us.
13 degrees from Cornell among the Grambow family. I think that's pretty impressive.
Well, I'm sure there's others here that have that with Duke and UNC and State. So, yeah.
So this is not related to your veterinary career, but I would love for you to tell how you and Barbara met at Cornell, if you don't mind.
No, it was great. It pays to study. I went to the library practically every night. After classes, I would stay up on the campus and go to the ag library. I had noticed this nice young lady walking around the campus, and in fact, was introduced to her at one time, but I was kind of low-key, and that was a challenge for me to see. But anyway, Barbara showed up in the library all of a sudden, and as she got up to leave to go back to the dorms, something said, "Get up and get going, kid," you know. So she stopped at the water fountain right outside the library door, and I caught up to her at that time. We started talking, and I walked her home, which was not too far from where I lived. And from then on, we've been together pretty much, 64 years so of marriage, wonderful family, and she's a wonderful person, and I owe her all the credit in the world. She was right there. We lived over our small animal practice in a nice facility, and if I needed help during the night, she was there, and her surgical tech training helped. We did cesareans and things like that together, and when we needed it, we called on the kids. So the kids, I have a daughter that's a special ed teacher, Debbie. She lives in Raleigh. The next one is Bonnie. She's a DVM, PhD surgeon, teaches small animal soft tissue surgery in Washington State. And my youngest daughter, Nancy, is a PhD geneticist that lives in Davis, California. Yeah, we got a great family, and I've been very blessed. The other one that went to Cornell is my youngest granddaughter, and she is a food scientist, and she's been working with Beyond Meat and has a lot to do with the flavor of Beyond Meat.
That is really neat to hear about how your whole family would sometimes pitch in at your practice. And I think that you and Barbara are such a great example of a team in so many different aspects. A team in raising your kids, a team at the animal hospital. Like you said, she would even assist on some procedures and things like that. And I think that's really cool. 64 years of marriage, and I hope I can learn from y'all's partnership. I've only been married 2 years, so
that's a good start.
Doesn't quite measure up, but yes, a good start. So after Cornell, like you said, that was an extremely rigorous program, but studying paid off as you met your wife in the library. What happened after Cornell?
Went back to my hometown, started working in the practice, which didn't really work out for us. And we ended up in Syracuse, New York. I worked for another practitioner for 7 years. Once decided I needed to I wanted to go out on my own. Kept looking, had no funds to really start. I met a person who had a little dog named Gigi, and we got to be friends. He owned a building which he wanted to sell or get rid of. He put me in the building on a net lease for 3 years, an option to buy, and that's all I needed to get started. And it's an example of not truly, I was fortunate, but I also looked for and I worked and took the opportunity that came before me that I was searching for, and that was the beginning of a 30 years of practice in a nice location. Yeah, and our family lived upstairs, so that's why they were there to help me on things and really were involved.
I love envisioning that. You opening your own practice after working with someone else for about 7 years, and your family living above the clinic, I think sounds like a really neat way to grow up for your kids. And also just sounds like a really beautiful chapter of your life. So what was it like running your own veterinarian clinic? What was your day-to-day like? Are there any cases that stand out?
Many cases, but if you've watched James Herriot's books, All Creatures Great and Small, I probably had as many adventures that he took notes and I didn't, and so when he got older he could write, and that was great. I had the opportunity to know people that knew him well, and but anyway, every day was a day when you didn't know what you were going to see or do. Or I did a lot of surgery. At that time, there was no leash laws. The dogs and cats ran free, and many dogs came in that were hit broken legs and cuts and bruises. So I did a lot of surgery. I did everything when I first opened. Now, most practices are larger. They have more veterinarians. There's a specialty, like my daughter's a surgeon, but there's a specialty like there's in humans, not only specialty in the type of animal or the breed or species of animal you see, but also in the system, surgeons, ophthalmology, all those things exist as in the human or in veterinary medicine as it is in human. So over the 40 years, it changed. When I started, we did everything, but as time went on, he became more of a specialist with certain things.
Wow, that's really impressive that now people have one sort of specialty as a veterinarian, but you had to do it all, and I'm sure that means you saw a lot of different cases and a variety of things. I loved the story you told me once about the little girl who brought in her black kitty. Will you tell that again?
Sure, that's one of my favorites because I like to talk to little kids when they come in with their animal, and I like to impress upon them that the animal is just like you and I. I usually start my hand on the head of the animal, and I say, do you have, what is this? And does the animal have one? Does your kitty have one? And we go from the ears, the nose, the eyes, the neck, the shoulders, the front legs, and this little kitty had come in because it had an intestinal problem. And so I'm going down over the body, and we get the hind legs. I take a hold of the tail, and I pick it up, and I says, "What does a kitty have that you and I don't have?" And she said, "Diarrhea." She was about 4 years old and really cute and really interested in what we were doing. And
I wonder where that little girl is now.
oh, that's right. I've wondered about that too.
You know, she wasn't wrong. She didn't have a tail or the intestinal problems.
But the kids, when they came in, I really enjoyed that. Yeah.
I can definitely imagine you doing that with the kids and going over how the animals have the same body parts. And I know that even with your own great-grandchildren, you recently were installing a bird feeder, I think. And that's really neat to think about the relationship between children and animals. They are in awe of the beauty of creation. And I think it's a good reminder to look at animals through the eyes of a child. And kids do say some pretty funny things. So how long were you at your practice?
Okay. It was Fairmont Animal Hospital on the west side of Syracuse, New York. And I was there until 1993. We started in 65. And I was there until 1993 when my partner said to me, "Dick, when are you going to get out? I want to do my thing." I said, "John, just as soon as you pay me enough," and he did.
There you go.
And it worked out real fine for us. At that point, we had moved from over the practice, and we had a nice home on Skinny Atlas Lake. If any of you know where that is, it's one of the larger or smaller Finger Lakes in central New York, and very clean, and it was a real happy day to leave practice and live on the lake. Yeah.
That does sound like an idyllic retirement after
it was.
Running your own animal hospital for decades and then getting to retire by the lake. And I know you and Barbara also did a lot of traveling during that time too.
We've been fortunate to travel after we didn't have the practice to worry about. We were able to travel. We've hit pretty much, I don't think, we didn't go to Antarctica, but we've hit the rest of the continents. And anybody here that's traveled, that's a great thing to watch people and see people in their own environments. And yeah.
That's definitely one thing that's been hard for a lot of people during the virus, I think, is having to postpone or cancel travel plans. So
absolutely.
I love seeing all the pictures in your cottage of all the places you've been. I like the one of you and Barbara with the koala in Australia. That's one place that's on my bucket list.
Yeah, when we went, you were able to hold a koala. And we were in Brisbane, and yeah.
Gosh.
Safaris, we've been at safaris, and we've been very blessed.
So I want to shift gears just for a minute and talk about this beautiful rose here. Like I mentioned at the beginning of our show, that's how I met Dr. Grambow, was when he was caring for the roses here at Crowsdale. And you are kind of a rose connoisseur. And I was wondering how you first got interested, or how you fell in love with roses.
Well, I always liked gardening, okay? Never really had an opportunity to have a big garden or anything when I was a kid. But anyway, the first veterinarian I worked for him in the summertime. He was from my hometown, and I was working for him during the summer while I was a student. he had about 40 rose bushes, and he's the one that really introduced me to roses, Dr. Green. And from then on, they were hybrid teas, and that's what I favor, and that's what we have here. From then on, I had roses myself. My practice, we had a lot of roses in front of the place, and in the spring when they all came out, I couldn't have had a better sign out front. It was a place great, people would always notice them. Anyway, and then when we moved to the lake, we had 110 rose bushes that were on the shoreline, and which people came by in boats and looked at them. So, yeah.
What a great reputation to have, is being someone who always has beautiful roses at your animal clinic, at your lake home, and that all started when you were younger working for Dr. Green, who must have had a green thumb, I must say.
Yeah,
I couldn't resist. But I was saying when Dr. G walked in that this looks just like the beautiful rose from Beauty and the Beast. I wish all of you watching could see it as up close as I can, because it really is beautiful. And I think that's a great signature for you to have that.
And I've been very fortunate, because when I came here, Doris Sorrell, who was the president, had taken care and put in a rose garden, which is now where the pub is. And she was fairly ill at the time, and nobody was really taking care of the roses, and marketing called me one day and wanted to know if we'd come help deadhead the roses, and so Barbara and I went there, and we met Doris Sorrell. A couple of days later, she called me and said, "Would you take care of the roses?" I had her blessings, because she didn't like many people taking care of her roses. And from then, I guess it's been 10 years now that we've been taking care of. I've had a lot of help, and there's a nice group of ladies that come to help me. We cut the roses and put them in vases on Tuesdays and Fridays mornings, and yeah, we're happy to do it.
Well, I know.
We hope you enjoyed it.
I know I speak on behalf of the entire Crowsdale community when I say thank you to you and those wonderful ladies that you mentioned for taking such good care of our beautiful roses. And I think it's easy to walk through the community and see all the gorgeous bouquets of brilliant roses and think they just popped up there, and not to think about the work that your group did in tending to them and caring for them, and then putting them in vases so that we can have fresh flowers around our community. I think that's such a gift. So thank you.
Yeah.
So
we're fortunate that Crowsdale has those roses, I think.
So you are very humble, and I just want to say your career